Thank you so much.
Well, I want to thank Laura and Ed for the invitation. My name is Bill, and I am an alcoholic. I've had the gift of recovery since December the 27th of 1972. So if my math is right and my spirit is cooperative, in December I'll have 50 years. And I would never have believed that back in the beginning. Let me tell you that. But time does go by really fast, and forever grateful to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and to so many people who took the time to take me under their wing and teach me the things that I needed to learn. It was pretty amazing all along the line. When I was ready, there they were, and most of them have passed on. So, and what I'm trying to be about is passing on some of the material that I've found really helpful in studying the history. So, this is a workshop. It's not an AA meeting per se. I'm not going to tell too much of my drunkalog story, maybe none. So we have more time to get into the information that I would really like to share with folks.
No more.
Say again. All right. Well, here's what we're going to cover in this in the workshop is taking a look at the 12 steps in terms of primarily how they emerged from the Oxford group. Okay. We're going to look at how the pioneers originally took the steps before there were steps. So what's really interested me is that period, 1934, Wilson gets sober, and then 1939, the big book comes out. And Wilson said that was the flying blind period. Well, it wasn't really that blind. They didn't have steps, but they did have a program. And I started kind of studying that program, and what it did for me was help me get a much deeper and richer understanding of the 12 steps that we're all familiar with. So, I'm interested. I'm not a historian kind of thing. I worked in the treatment field for many years, and my job was to help people connect with the program who would have a hard time perhaps otherwise connecting. If you get this thing by just going to AA, great. I had some the sicker folks, let's say, who had to go the treatment route. And so my interest was always how to bridge that gap, how to help them get into the program, work in the steps, doing that. And I'm telling you, once I started digging into the history, it just made the thing come alive in a different way. And I'm hoping that's what will happen with you guys today. So, so I guess what I'm talking about here is I'm not interested in the history for the sake of history, but I'm interested in history for the sake of how it can be of help to us today. And primarily, I think that is in memory of Dr. Bob, to keep this thing simple, because I think in many ways we have complicated the steps. Everybody's got his or her opinion on how the steps should be done, and this, that, and the other thing. And it kind of gets accumulated. And so for the new person coming in, sometimes it can look overwhelming. But I think the history can teach us a simpler way. What's the essence of this step thing? What's supposed to happen at this point in the recovery journey? So I said, again, if you got questions, put them in the chat, and we'll try to answer those as best I can. All right. So my story is I started drinking at age 12. I was one of those alcoholics from the get-go. I'm from New York City originally. Irish Catholic background. Drinking was just part of the culture, you know, and I got sober. I also did have a deep spiritual part of myself, you know. Other kids were out playing football, and I was playing mass, you know. So my spiritual pathology is, it's really sick and deep, you know. But it's just part of who I am. And man, my drinking progressed very quickly. I was very big on the geographical cure, and in the Peace Corps, working with orphan kids in the Bronx. Long story short, worked in Israel on a kibbutz. I wound up in the Jesuits, studying to be a Jesuit priest, and in Detroit. And I had volunteered at an alcohol treatment center. The other guys in the seminary were, you know, doing holy things, but I was always kind of your radical priest in training, was my bio, and had an appeal to me. It's the first time I saw the 12 steps, and I remember seeing them for the first time, and they called to me. I started going to AA pretty quickly. They put me through group therapy, and they quickly nailed me as an alcoholic. I stayed sober in AA for about 3 months, and then I went out to California and got drunk on the way out there, and then went underground for about 2 years. When I got sober, I had a really tough counselor, therapist, sponsor. He was all three rolled into one, and he sent me to live on Skid Row for 1 year. That was his set of instructions. He said, "Bill, you know, you're 27, and you ain't going to make it unless you really have an intense feeling for what this program is about." So I did that, and I'm forever grateful. I've never sent anybody else on the journey. Stayed sober 20 years. At 20 years sober, and I find this is somewhat common. When it hits, it's different, but I was getting bored, dry. AA was losing its punch. I had really I think I was a good AA member, but it was just getting boring. And it was like, is this what I have to look forward to? And I was just ready for something more. I don't know. I hope some people can identify with that, you know? And once I got ready, it was amazing. Things just started to happen. The first one, and Bridget's out there in kind of West Texas, and that's where this happened. I went to dinner with a guy, and he was far more advanced than I in AA, and I told him, I'm just kind of getting bored. Can you help me? And he said, well, do you ever hear the story of the 5 M's? It's the story of spiritual institutions. It's how they evolve over time. And I said, no, I haven't. And I share this because it was one of the best stories I ever heard, and it helped me understand AA, helped me understand treatment centers, helped me understand religious orders, churches, things of that nature. And so the story goes like this. I'll just give you a quickie version, but it starts with the man. Could be a woman, but then it really screws up the 5 M's. So it's a man, and the man could be Buddha, it could be Jesus, it could be Bill Wilson, it could be Moses. That man has a spiritual experience. God touches him, he touches God. The boundary line between the two is dissolved for a short period of time, usually. So for Jesus, it's into the Jordan, the baptism, sky opens up. This is my beloved, listen to him. For Moses, it's on the mountaintop, an encounter with God. For Buddha, it's sitting under the tree, contemplating life and the mysteries of life, and he gets it. And for Bill Wilson, what? It's his fourth time in detox, his fourth time in a year and a half, and he prays, "Oh God, if there is a God, help me." That was an Oxford group prayer, by the way. We all know the story, white light experience, all right? An encounter with the divine, an experience. And we're going to talk about experience rather than awakening. I'll save that for the end, but in the beginning, that's of course what they wrote in the book, huh? First version, having had a spiritual experience as a result of these steps. Well, my experience was getting light. I think of it looking back, that's what was happening with me. Anyway, so you have the man, he has that encounter, he comes back with the message. What's the message? The message is who we are. And who we are ain't who we thought we were. Just a few moments ago, as a result of this encounter, you receive a change, a dramatic change in your understanding of yourself, because you're now connected to something far greater than you. So for Wilson, he from that moment on, he knew his drinking problem had been taken care of as a result of that encounter, and he was obsessed, you might say, for many, many years. How is there a way that I can repeat the encounter that I had with other alcoholics? That was the driving force in his life. So the message, and the message isn't that I'm an alcoholic, and that's an important part to get. We don't make much progress before that. The message is who I am in terms of my relationship to God and myself and you. That's the message. That's the far deeper message. And that message is transformational. And once you get it, you watch for people to start coming to you. A movement begins to happen. So you got Buddha and his monks. You got Jesus and the disciples. You got Moses and the tribe of Israel. All right. And you got Bill Wilson and the first 100. The early days of the AA movement as it starts to evolve. It's an exciting time. It's alive. Fire is all around you. I mean, you're connected instantly to spirit. You can pick it up. But what happens over time is it starts to get organized. It starts to become mechanical. And to me, this is the danger. But it's a necessary evolution. But it's what's going to happen to spiritual institutions. They tend to dry up. They tend to become mechanical. I remember a sweet woman, I really love her, but she, a number of years ago, sent me a 12-step rosary. I looked and said, what the hell are we doing here? Are we going to make the same mistake that the churches make? I worry that, 300 years from now, someone will have an AA world conference and someone will hold up the sacred coffee pot, that Dr. Bob and Bill drank from. And if you can't get sober, come rub the coffee pot, And here are the ashes of the first 100. They're cigarette ashes, you know? Smear these on your forehead and you'll get sober. Magic. We're chanting. I noticed when we read How It Works, now we chant back. You know, it's coming, guys. It's coming. You know, if we're not careful, let me go back here. If we're not careful, you're gonna. What happens after the machine stage is it becomes a mausoleum. And that means it's a tombstone, it's a monument, it's dead. You know, AA, we had our highest numbers in 1990. It's been on somewhat of a decline since then. We're not growing at the rate we were growing. When I kind of watch TV, you know, a number of times you'll watch a show and it's an AA meeting that they're putting on. And God, does it look dead? Does it look dead so many times? You know, I'm Joe, I'm a nothing, I screwed up, oh yeah. But I'm not hearing the kind of excitement that needs to be there oftentimes. I mean, thank God there's parts of the program where it's still alive. And thank God for that. And that's what we are, I think, charged with doing, is keeping it alive, keeping it exciting, keeping it connected. And that means deeply spiritual. Now, the spiritual may evolve in terms of what that means. I don't certainly have a 1940 kind of religious spirituality. I mean, I think that goes on. But the essence of it, the connectedness of it, that has to remain the same. Okay, 5 M's. This is a quote I really like from Carl Sandburg. He says, whenever a society or a civilization fails, there's always one condition present. They forgot where they came from. They forgot where they came from. You know, the Oxford Group was first called, its initial name was the First Century Christian Fellowship. It's like, we got to get back to the first century because the religious stuff has kind of died. You understand? And that really attracted me. I was a history major in college and taught history, and what I found, again, like studying the AA history, studying the Oxford Group history, gave me some real deep insights into what Wilson was trying to do when he wrote the steps. All right. So here's Wilson on the steps. There's a quote from him. He said, "Where did we learn about moral inventory, amends for harm done, turning our will and our lives over to God? Where did we learn about meditation and prayer and all the rest of it? The spiritual substance of our remaining 10 steps." So that means steps 2 through 11 came straight from Dr. Bob's and my own early association with the Oxford groups, as they were then led in America by that Episcopal rector, Dr. Samuel Shoemaker. So, I don't know if we get to that in this workshop, but I mean, Bill Wilson was a member of the Oxford group originally. Dr. Bob was a member of the Oxford group. It was their program that they then took and tweaked for alcoholics and put it into form. The Oxford group people didn't have steps. And they didn't have steps 1 and they didn't have steps 12. So what Wilson's saying here is 2 through 11, I give them to the Oxford group. 1 came from somewhere else. So I want to spend some time particularly on step 1. So we'll put the steps in context. Some of this, I mean, you all probably quite familiar with this, but we have Roland Hazard, alcoholic, back in the early 1930s, and he is declared hopeless. He's been in treatment several times. Rich guy from Rhode Island. He finally goes over to Switzerland and is placed under the care of Carl Jung. And he stays sober for a short time, but he relapses, and then tries to get Jung to re-engage him in therapy, and Jung refuses. I'm so glad he did, because what he said was, "You are." This story's in the book, huh? It's in the big book, The Businessman. You are an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. I try everything I can with you, and it did not work. What you need, Roland, is a psychic change, a spiritual experience. And your best place to get that is to place yourself in a religious environment. That's what he told him. And that is what Roland did. Goes back to the States, gets involved eventually with the Oxford group. And they were life changers. They were soul surgeons. They went by those two names. And Roland helps who? He helps Ebby Thatcher, who's another drunk and in trouble. And he helps Ebby. Ebby then carries the message to Bill Wilson. Wilson, we pick up on his story at this point. As I said earlier, he's been in detox 3 times, and his therapist, counselor, doctor, declares him hopeless. He's telling Lois, get ready, this guy's not going to make it. He's not going to make it. Thought he could at the beginning, but no, hopeless. Now, I want us to, well, let's see. So anyway, just a few words on Silkworth, and I'm going to do some board work in a minute here, because I think if you get step 1, if we really get step 1, and this is where I'm really indebted to a number of people who kind of gave me the seeds for this. But if you get step 1, it's kind of like dominoes. Things fall into place pretty quickly. If you don't get step 1, you're going to bump and scrape, and you're going to have a really hard time. So step 1, we're going to spend quite a bit more time on that than the others, but then it'll go pretty quickly. So Bill then writes the steps, eh? We did that. And when he wrote the steps, this is just a little kind of sideline here, but this has something to do with two-way prayer, the thing that we've really lost from our 12-step history. As he started to write, he asked for guidance. The purpose of step 11 is to receive guidance. And as he relaxed, the words began tumbling out at an astonishing speed. He completed the first draft in about half an hour, then kept on writing until he felt he should stop and review what he had written. Numbering the new steps, he found they added to 12, a symbolic number. He thought of the 12 apostles, soon became convinced that the society should have 12 steps. Okay. So the 12 steps, kind of stumbled on this in some Oxford group. It's not exactly there, but it's, I've never seen it kind of pulled together like this, but I think it really fits. That the first, well, let me start over here. Over here is this self. And this self is in a primary relationship with alcohol. That'll become clearer in a minute. But it is separated from this, it's separated from this, and it's separated even from its true self. Can you relate to that? I mean, the book says what? We know loneliness like few people do. We're cut off. This is a relationship thing. I'm in a relationship with my only friend, my alcohol, my drug, whatever it might be. That's a substitute for life. I'm disconnected. So the first 3 steps are about connection. How do I begin removing these barriers between myself and God, myself and others? So step 1 says what? We admitted we're powerless over alcohol. ... Sometimes it's a dash, but it's very significant. Whether it's 3 dots or a dash, it's really important, all right? That there's a connection between these two. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol. ... That our lives had become unmanageable. And we're going to talk about Dr. Silkworth's allergy theory to get us going. He had this allergy theory, you know, and the way it was presented to me when I came into the program was basically in this formula. You know, I was never very good at math, so bear with me. But if you take alcohol and you drink it, and you do that over time, and that time can be an instant time, or it could be 5, 10, 15 years. A person may go through a period of social drinking. But if you've got this X factor, and X stands for what? The unknown. Silkworth didn't know where it was. Today, the scientists say it's in the brain chemistry. And I think they're right. It's in the part of the physical part of the illness is in the way alcohol reacts within our bodies. Now, if you don't drink alcohol and you live a long time and you still have the X factor, you ain't going to become an alcoholic. You might become a Baptist, you know. Well, an honest Baptist, because most of them drink too, you know. So it's a. But if you're Irish, you're going to get introduced to this thing real early. So you're going to have alcohol. Mine triggered quite quickly. I had the X factor. My father was, every male member of my family was an alcoholic. Half of the women were alcoholics. So my X factor was, boom, primed, you know. So Bill starts learning about this theory that Silkworth has. So this is from the AA literature. Bill listened, entranced, as Silkworth explained his theory. For the first time in his life, Bill was hearing about alcoholism not as a lack of willpower, not as a moral defect, but as a legitimate illness. It was Silkworth's theory, unique at the time, that alcoholism was the combination of this mysterious physical allergy. So that's one thing in the formula, the allergy of the body, and the compulsion to drink. And I'm going to suggest, well, I mean, we see this in the literature all the time. Allergy of the body coupled with something else. What? An obsession of the mind. Allergy of the body, obsession of the mind. That's the compulsion to drink. That alcoholism could no more be defeated by willpower than could tuberculosis. Bill's relief was immense. So what I want to do is try to share with you what I hope will be helpful. Can you guys see the board? I mean, yes? Can you see the board? Shall I stop?
Yes, we can see it. We can see it.
What if I stop the screen? No, you can see it. All right. So let me, I'll try to get through this as quickly as I can. What I'm suggesting and what I've been taught, no, not just suggesting, this is what I've been taught, and I credit this understanding with a big chunk of how I got through my 50 years, almost, all right? Because my understanding of step one, I think, is a little bit different than most people in the program. So bear with me. And don't judge me too harshly. I'm a very sensitive alcoholic, okay? So, but if you separate these two things out, powerless, what is the meaning of that word? Because I hear alcoholics all the time, I'm powerless. I'm powerless over this, I'm powerless over that. I'm powerless over people, places, and things. It drives me kind of crazy because I think you're in danger of losing a key ingredient of step one. I'm powerless over alcohol. And let's just leave it at that. And let's reserve it for that. At least this is the way I was taught, that you reserved being powerless to alcohol and to any other chemical or something that you may react to. So how do you react? Well, you take a drink, and how does that feel? Feels good. And you take another drink, feels better. But then this illness thing kicks in, this allergy kicks in, doesn't it? And I drink more than I had intended to drink. I want to get to feeling good, feeling really high. And what do? I wind up drunk. I wind up in a hell of a lot. I wind up drinking more than I intended to drink. Can you follow that? And can you agree with me on that? All right. So I get drunk, and I get drunk a lot. All right. I get drunk a lot. And when I get drunk, and this anybody, you're not an alcoholic. You just got this X factor thing. You know, and those the big book say, some people can quit in time. They recognize this is happening. So, oh, I better watch this alcohol stuff. I'm putting it down. But the problems begin to amass. Hey, I get drunk and in trouble. And if you get drunk a lot, you're going to have a lot of problems. All right. What kind of problems? You're going to have physical problems. You're going to have financial problems. You're going to have employment problems. You're going to have family problems. You're going to have legal problems. All right. You're going to have problems. All right. And to this group, I don't think I have to explain that. All right. Nor do I have to share mine. We all have it. All right. I got in trouble in the seminary. We used to have daily mass, and I would line up at the end of the line, about 15, 20 guys in the seminary. I'd always line up at the end of the line so I could drain the cup, you see, the wine. An old priest pulls me aside one time. He says, "Bill, I cannot help but notice that your devotion to the blood of Christ far, far exceeds your devotion to the body of Christ." In trouble, always in trouble. All right. When you get in trouble a lot, as we do, you come around this side of the circle and you make an attempt to quit. I made several attempts to quit. And I hope you had made several attempts to quit. Most of us do. And I ask people, when you tried to quit at that moment, were you serious about doing it? You serious, and were you determined? Were you determined to do it? Willpower. I'm serious and I'm determined. And then I'll ask people, well, how long did you go? Well, I went a day, or I went a week, or I went 3 weeks, or 5 weeks, or a year, or 3 years. Time. And I'm not working with that formula, but I'm suggesting something different here. All right. Now, what happened? And this is where a word comes in that I think we have totally misused, misunderstood, and that I didn't grasp until I started studying the history. And Wilson chose this word. All right? What's the word? He said our lives had become unmanageable. That's a funny word, isn't it? I woke up drunk and in trouble many times. I never woke up and said, God, how do I feel? Unmanageable. I never said that. You know, I don't know that I ever really used that word before I came into AA. It was an Oxford group word. It came from a prayer. I may hit this later in the workshop. But it came from a prayer where they prayed, God, I can't manage my life. Manage it for me. So when Wilson is searching for this allergy of the body coupled with the obsession of the mind, it's my belief, can't prove it, but it's my belief that he chose this word from his Oxford group experience. Our lives had become unmanageable. Now, to me, the big mistake that we make is this. We believe that our lives are unmanageable looking at drunken problems, the financial, the legal, the moral, all of that sort of stuff. I said, boy, my life became unmanageable. No, your life was a mess. My life was a mess. Unmanageable has to do with something it has to do with the mind. All right? The mind. So if this is physical, powerless, allergy of the body, hey? Physical. I'm not powerless over Albuquerque, places and things. I'm not powerless over Albuquerque. All right? But I am powerless over alcohol. And when I drink it, it's like someone who's powerless over penicillin. They take it and they go into shock. Because why? Because they're powerless over it. Well, my powerlessness expresses itself in this craving for more. That's the difference. All right? So if this is the physical, unmanageable is the mental, the craving part of the mind. I've tried to quit. I'm sincere about quitting. I'm intent on quitting. And guess what? I don't quit. I pick it up. This is the jaywalker story in the book. That's what it's trying to explain. That, goes to the hospital because he got hit by a car. He's a jaywalker. And they say, stay the hell away from cars. And as soon as he gets out of the hospital, he sees the bus. Didn't say anything about buses. And he steps in front of a bus and gets hit by a bus. That's what they're trying to say. There's a madness, where there's an insanity that is part of the illness. Now, so if you do this thing, step one is a circle, as a cycle of addiction, hey, the problem is not this, that I'm powerless. I have to come to realize that. The problem is over here. The problem is that I am trying to manage my life. God, manage it for me because I can't. And if you look at step one this way, then what I have painted on this board, if I stay within the circle, is a hopeless condition. All right? It's a hopeless cycle of addiction that alcoholics, addicts get caught in. the question then becomes, how do I have a psychic change, a change in mind at the deepest levels sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism? And that's what Jung sent Roland in search of. And that's what it says in the big book. Hey, you need a psychic change. You need a spiritual experience. Go place yourself in an environment where that can happen. So to me, the word that is missing from step one, but is the whole message of step one, and that's why I put it in the 3 little dots or the dash: hopeless, powerless over alcohol, lives become unmanageable. Put those two together, you got a hopeless condition. Without what? Without a psychic change. Without a deep, deep change in the whole person. And that's what Oxford Group was about. And that's what I think what AA and the 12-step journey is about. How to bring about a change sufficiently deep to overcome alcoholism. All right? Let's see. Hopelessness. Some quotes from the book. Your homework assignment is to go over the first 3 or 4 chapters, 5 chapters of the big book, and underline every time it says hopeless. It's the word that's missing from the step, but it is the step. We of AA are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. The remorse, horror, and hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. While I lay in the hospital, the thought came to me, there were thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be blah, blah, blah. We of AA know thousands of men and women who were once just as hopeless as Bill. Nearly all have recovered. We have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body. We've come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we have been living it. He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. So when I used to deliver this lecture, the circle thing in treatment, I always wanted to end my lecture and say, okay, guys and gals, you're all hopeless. Have a nice day, and walk away. You know? And you know, there was something to that. I never had the guts to do it, but I always wanted to, because that's what has to hit us. You know? And if you've got enablers all around you who keep you from an experience of your hopelessness, it's not going to be helpful. All right? So quiz me on that in the chat if besides, it's very important, I think, that you get an understanding of that. So Wilson, after his white light experience, he reads the book Varieties of Religious Experience by William James. Says James becomes one of the founders of AA as a result of what he read in that book. All right. Did a podcast series on variety of religious experience with a guy who wrote a new book on it. I encourage you to listen to that. He has some very good insights. Here's what Wilson said after reading it. These gifts of, so what's the book about? The book is about 40 or 50 people throughout history who have undergone psychic changes. All right. And William James, father of American psychology, is studying them. And that's the essence of this book. So 2 or 3 of the people in the book are alcoholics. And Wilson reads this. And now he gets an understanding of what just happened to him. How hopelessness was actually a necessary part of his own transformation, that it contributed to it. He writes, these gifts of grace, the stories in the book, whether they came in a rush or very gradually, were all founded on a basis of hopelessness. The recipients were people who in some controlling area of life found themselves in a situation that could not be gotten over, around, or under. Many of us tried to find a softer, easier way. Their defeat had been absolute, and so was mine. You get it? That's step one. That's step one. A deep experience of hopelessness, which then leads itself to the kind of a prayer he did. Oh God, if there is a God, if there's anything outside of me that can help me, please help me. So this is the flow into step two. Every step leads into the next step. Once you've really fully experienced a step, it flows, it carries you into the next step almost automatically. All right? So step two, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Underline could, because you don't have to believe that it will. You only have to be convinced sufficiently that it might. That's all you need. That's all you need. And the history will teach you this. It'll teach you this in a very, very helpful way. It did me. Gave me a whole different understanding of that step. So, yeah, we kind of did that. Down here, the Oxford group was not interested in defining God, only in the possibility that the power of God could be accessed. So think of step two, because they did, as sort of an experiment. That you don't have to master step two. You don't have to, you just have to step into the laboratory now, and we're going to go through the steps. And in the beginning, they went through them very quickly, didn't they? I mean, Wilson went through them, boom, boom, boom. Dr. Bob, boom, boom, boom. You know, we got people now who say, well, one step a month, you know. For God's sakes, people will be dead, you know, if they're not transformed quicker than that. If you want to get academic about it, might be nice, interesting. One step a month is all you can handle. Well, good luck. Here's how step two went in the early days. All right. I really get a kick out of this. So Clarence Snyder, who started AA in Cleveland, is a patient of Dr. Bob's, and he's down there in Akron in the hospital. So Bob is coming to make his rounds, and he visits with Clarence. And I think you could say this is Clarence's second step. Bob, do you believe in God, young fella? He always called me young fella. When he called me Clarence, I knew I was in trouble. What does that have to do with it? Everything, he said. I guess I do. Guess nothing. Either you do or you don't. Yes, I do. That's fine, Dr. Bob replied. Now we're getting someplace. All right, get out of bed and on your knees. We're going to pray. Step two is over. It's done. Is it possible? Is it possible that there could be a God? Is it possible that there is some power out there in the universe that can do for you what you can't do for yourself? That's really the question. Is that so? So here's step two in a nutshell. It can be completed in under a minute. 2 if you're still in detox. The first question to ask is it possible there could be a God? The second question to ask is, if God were to exist, could God do for you what you cannot do for yourself? begin the process of recovery then as an experiment. All right. So there's step 2. I wasted years on that. I thought I had to come up with an image of God, a concept of God, had to understand God, you know? Well, that's a waste of time, you know? You just got to hope to hell there is one. Otherwise, you're screwed. You know, hit them with the hopelessness. Hit them with the hopelessness. That's where it's at. That's where it's at. So step 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And that's changing. And I think that's a good thing. God's less of a hymn these days. Oftentimes you'll see people changing that to the care of God as we understood God. You know, that's, I think that's progress in some ways. Any honest person can begin the spiritual experiment by surrendering, this is Shoemaker primarily here, yeah, by surrendering as much of himself as he understands to as much of God as he understands. And this is Shoemaker prior to the big book. So you're starting to see some language here that Wilson, because he's in the Oxford group, now that language migrates over into the big book. Any honest person can begin the spiritual experiment by how? Surrendering as much of himself as he understands to as much of God as he understands. Surrender as much of yourself as you know to as much of God as you know. Anne Smith's notebook, where she was a member of the Oxford group and was very influential in teaching Bill and Bob when Wilson stayed with them for about 3 months. She injected a lot of Oxford group psychology, spirituality into their understanding. Shoemaker again. Faith is not sight, it is a high gamble. There are only 2 alternatives here. God is or God isn't. You leap one way or the other. This is the line that I like. It is a risk to bet everything you have on God. So is it a risk not to. Let that one sink in. Boy, is it a risk to take step 3? Damn right it is. Is it a risk not to take step 3? Damn right it is. Sends me right back to 1. Sends me right back to that hopeless circle again. I'm either getting out of the circle or I'm on my way back into it. You don't stand still. You follow me? You don't stand still. We're moving towards or we're dropping back. So step 3 from Clarence is a great example. He's just finished step 2. Doc said, get out of that bed. Clarence was shocked. He asked, for what? Doc replied, you're going to pray. Clarence pleaded with him. Enough was enough. I don't know anything about praying, Clarence said. I don't suppose that you do, but you get down there and I will pray. You can repeat it after me, and that'll do for this time. Doc then took Clarence by the hand and hauled him off of that, quote, nice warm nest, as Clarence put it, and down to the cold, hard concrete floor. Clarence in his shorty hospital nightshirt, tied together in the back by a couple of strings. Doc in a suit with a loud colored tie, argyle socks, and a diamond stick pin with a lion's head. What a sight to behold. Both men on their knees by the side of the hospital bed in an attitude of prayer. Doc uttered some sort of prayer, pausing every few words so that Clarence had the time to repeat them. Clarence didn't quite remember the words of the prayer exactly, but he did remember its being something like this. Jesus, this is Clarence Snyder. He's a drunk. Clarence, this is Jesus. Ask him to come into your life. Ask him to remove your drinking problem and pray that he manages your life because you are unable to manage it yourself. After they had concluded this simple prayer, they rose from the side of the bed. Doc shook Clarence's hand and said to him, young feller, you're going to be all right. Step 3. Now, I made a terrible mistake with step 3. I'll introduce it now. I think I forgot to say that, at the 20 years sober, after that guy told me the story about the 5 M's, shortly after that, I was introduced in Oklahoma City. I met an archivist who presented me with the material, some of the material about the Oxford group. He was a student of the Oxford group, collected books on it. He took me basically through the steps as they were done, got me down on my knees in his living room. He said, Bill, have you done your 3rd step with somebody? This was 30 years ago. I said, I do my 3rd step every day. He said, no, that's not how they did it. They did it with one another. Have you done it with another person? Have you given your life to God in the presence of another person? I said, no. He said, are you willing to do it? I said, yes. Like Clarence, I get down on my knees. He gets down on his knees. Share it. All right. Give your life to God. Should I say the 3rd step prayer? He says, I wish you wouldn't. And why did he say, I wish you wouldn't? Because it's mechanical. It's mechanical. Say 3 Our Fathers and 3 Hail Marys, It's mechanical. Put it in your own words. Struggle with your own words. And I did. I'm not used to praying in front of people. I'm a real introvert. I'm a terrible introvert, But I did it, and I felt it. I felt it. I felt a shift inside. And see, that's what this thing's about. How do we engender in somebody that shift that's going to reduce the size of the ego to where it's functional, but not inflated, and there's room for God to come in and take its place. Here's another AA pioneer. I think this is in Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers AA publication. The surrender was more than important, it was a must. After 5 or 6 days in the hospital, when you had indicated that you were serious, they told you to get down on your knees by the bed and say a prayer to God, admitting you were powerless over alcohol and your life was unmanageable. Furthermore, you had to state that you believed in a higher power who could return you to sanity. There you can see the beginning of the 12 steps, he said. We called that the surrender. They demanded it. You couldn't go to a meeting until you did it. If by accident you didn't make it in the hospital, you had to make it upstairs in the bedroom of the Williams house, where they met in Akron and had their Oxford group meetings that they attended. Step 3 in a nutshell. It was intended as a one-time event. Now, this is important, Here's my belief. And I was talking to an old timer just the other day back in Philadelphia who had 47 years or something sober. And he was in agreement. And the only steps I work today, here's a heresy. Here's an AA mechanical heresy. The only 3 steps I work today are 10, 11, and 12. The only 3 steps. But I'll tell you this, there's not a principle or the elements of a step 1 through 9 that you're not going to find in 10, 11, and 12. You follow me? But you can get on the 12-step merry-go-round. And I've seen lots and lots of people, and I think I was on that 12-step merry-go-round, where you do the steps, start them over again, bah, 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 round the steps, round the steps. The steps can become a substitute for a spiritual experience. They can become a substitute, or they can lead you to it. But if you wind up worshiping the steps, doing 12-step rosaries, genuflecting in front of the steps, you know, you're going to miss it. You're going to do what religions tend to do. Miss it. They miss it. I think the mystics tend to get it. And I think alcoholics and addicts are misplaced mystics. And we're not going to settle for second best. We want the experience. We want the experience of God. That's what you're going to find in 10, 11, and 12. If you do them the way they were doing them in the early days, which we're not doing. We've made that mechanical too. Read my little 24-hour-a-day book, read this little meditation book, drink my coffee, off I go. Totally missed it. We'll get to that. Okay. So, step 3, one-time event. It's like getting married. You know, you don't get married every day. Well, some alcoholics do. I was in treatment years ago with an alcoholic who was married 9 times and a tough-ass therapist, you know. 9 times this guy was married. And the therapist says to him, why don't you marry your mother and get it over with? Marry your mother and get it over with, you know. One-time event. Like getting married, like confirmation. I say to the guys, it's like, think of it as circumcision, you know. It's a one-time event. If you want to do it every day, you go for it, all right? It was done in the presence of another surrendered person. That's important. Not by yourself, in the presence of another. It was done using your own words. I did this with a chaplain for a while there at a treatment center, and working with a Hispanic guy, tough guy, street guy. And he hadn't done, he came to me to do his fifth step. And I said, well, have you done the third? And of course he hadn't. I said, well, are you willing to do it? And it, kind of the Clarence Snyder example here. He gets on his knees and, shall I read the big book, you think? No, your own words. Just come from your heart. Come from your heart. He says, God, I've really fucked up my life. Please help me. I said, that was beautiful. That was beautiful. He did it. He felt it. I felt it. The room shook. He meant it. Tears were coming down from his eyes. It doesn't have to be a holy, holy thing. It has to be a thing that's going to start making you whole. And that's when he began that journey. Because he came from his heart. And didn't know what was there. He hoped to heck something was there. And whatever it was, oh God, if there is a God, help me. And he meant it. We're making a decision. That you're making a decision to align your will and your life with God's. That's the essence of step 3. A public, semi-public decision to align your life, your will with this God, who may or may not exist because it's still an experiment. But this was the beginning of a new connection. Okay, so Q&A. questions and answers. We'll take the chat first if there are any there. If not, we'll go to the live room. We'll try to keep this to about 10 minutes. If we don't get to all of them, I'm going to stay on after the meeting and can get to them. So, Laura, Ed, any questions?
Actually, so Bridget actually has her hand raised. She's not putting in the chat. I think that since there's only 25 people or so.
Okay, we can do. All right. Bridget, go ahead.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks. Quickly, how do you, with the dawning of the new era of Zoom, how do you propose to do a third step together with another? Do you find that that's
I did it. I
able?
did it with a kid in Moscow. I did it. Zoom is wonderful.
Okay.
It's not ideal, but it's, you do what you can do. And it can be done. I did a fifth step. I've done fifth step on Zoom.
Okay, and we have Kelly S. has her hand up.
Hi, Kelly Alcoholic. Thank you so much for doing this. So my question is, you said that you work 10, 11, and 12 every day. Those are the only steps that you really do.
Yep.
My question is, I am about 8 years sober, and I've had a lot of different things pop up in my life where I've had people who have more time than me, who I value and cherish their advice, will say to me, you need to do a 4-step on that.
Yeah, I understand.
And so I'm just curious as to how that works.
No problem. Continue to take personal inventory. That's 10. So they're asking you to take a personal inventory. Do it. Just don't call it a fourth step.
Genius.
That's me.
And humble. Okay, so we have Ed. Can you stand here at the, Ed has an in-room question.
Yeah, and I know that that's controversial. I know what I'm saying is controversial on that, but I'm telling you, I've met so many people who are stuck in the steps instead of living spirituality. And that's why I'm saying get to 10, 11, and 12, and we'll dig into them. And I think you'll see more clearly what I'm trying to get there. So bear with me till then.
Hey, Bill, Ed.
Yeah, Ed.
You talk about doing it with another person.
Yes.
I'd like to talk more about that. I mean, does God need a witness that it was
On
done?
the third step?
Yeah,
Of course, you're praying to God.
right.
But
But
is
with
it just
another
between
person.
you and God? No.
No, but taking the third step with another person.
Taking the third step.
Right.
Now, in 11, you're living the third step,
Right.
praying only for the knowledge of his will and the strength to carry that out, power to carry that out. That's where you're living step 3 on a daily basis.
But what about the taking the third step with another person?
Do it once, do it right.
And what's the power of having it with another person?
It's humbling. It's humbling. And you can reduce the whole 12-step journey down to ego reduction,
Amen.
getting it right-sized. I had a counselor I was back in Louisiana many years ago, we wanted to, 4 or 5 of us wanted to get together and like pray together, just for one time. And this guy went crazy. I don't pray with people. There's real resistance to this. I mean, people are more prone to jump into bed today than they are to get on their knees and pray with somebody.
Well, that's not me.
That's what they did, and there was power in the action. Have you done it? Have you done it, Ed?
Yes.
With someone?
Yes, and
Yeah.
that's why I
think it's
asked
kind
the
of coming
question.
back.
It was
30
so hard
years
for me
ago-
to do it with someone.
Say again?
That's why I ask. It is hard for me to pray
Yeah,
with people.
me
Yeah.
too.
No.
And I'm in the business now. But to
We
do
have,
it meaningfully and not mechanically.
Right, yeah.
That's the key.
we have Carl G with his hand up.
Thank you, Bill. Absolutely fabulous. I totally agree. My whole sponsor line says once you get through to the 12th step, do 10, 11, and 12 to the best of your ability on a daily basis. I came to understand something in step 1
Yes, good.
that I'd like your viewpoint on
Please.
in terms of unmanageability.
Right.
I had the belief, and have run into many others who believed if I got sober, I would be able to manage others, meaning I will get them to do what I want them to do. I will get what I want from the world. I will be the success in life that I always wanted. And I had a revelation that unmanageability means I don't have control over the outcomes.
Right.
I have some control when I'm
Some?
sane
Yes.
of my actions,
Yes, you do.
and I need to let God have control of the outcomes. Because if I try to have control of the outcomes, I'm going to just frustrate myself.
And on a daily basis, you're going to seek guidance as to what you should do that day. So who is managing your life? He is the director. We are the actors. He's the employer. We're the employee. It's getting that relationship right. If that relationship is right, what would you have me do? What should I do in this situation? If that conscious contact of 11 becomes a lived reality, your life is being managed for you.
And when in doubt, pause and ask God at once for guidance. Thank
That's
you.
right.
I just wanted to be sure that my understanding matched what I was hearing from you, and it does.
I think it does. Yes, I think it does. I mean, yeah. Yeah.
Now, if I can figure out how to mute myself, I'll go back to listening.
I'll mute you,
I
Carl.
see your life is unmanageable, guy.
Oh, but I'm going to get help. Thank you.
There you see you go.
I got, yeah.
All right, we ready to go on?
Actually, we have one other hand, but I have one question, just quickly. Sam Shoemaker's relationship to the Oxford group?
He was kind of the head of the Oxford group in the United
Okay.
States.
Okay, all right. And
He was at Calvary Church in New York City. They
okay.
ran a mission. Ebby was living at that mission. Bill started attending Oxford group meetings with Shoemaker. They became friends.
Right.
Shoemaker spoke at AA's 20th anniversary.
Right.
So he was close to Wilson. Wilson asked him actually to write the steps, and he refused. He said, no, an alcoholic needs to write them.
Sure, and the 12 and 12 is a result of the essays and the correspondence between the two, right?
No,
No?
no. Shoemaker had little to do with the writing of the 12 and 12. It was actually Thomas Powers who helped Wilson write the 12 and 12. He was the ghostwriter for the second edition of the Big Book, the 12 and 12, and AA Comes of Age.
Oh, right, okay, and what was the name of that book that he wrote? Because I just got done reading it,
Invitation to the Great Experiment.
Right. That was a great book. Okay.
It's a good book. It's old. He
It is.
started a kind of a different group called All Addicts Anonymous.
Yeah,
in
which is interesting.
Upstate New York. I visited them a couple of times. They're really good people. I mean, they lived together. It was sort of like an AA commune, like an ashram.
Yeah, I want to go. Okay.
But it's not there anymore.
Yeah. So we just have one more question, hand up on Zoom, Yvonne.
Okay, last one.
It's more of a comment than a question.
Okay.
I got sober on Zoom. So I just want to say that I had a sponsor who put me through the steps pretty quickly on Zoom.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not hearing anything.
And my step was one of the most powerful things I've ever experienced.
Yeah.
With my sponsor in her room and in mine, saying my own words, because she's really old school.
Old school.
And old school. And
Yeah.
it's real, and I thank her for that every single day, along with doing a fifth step on Zoom.
Yeah,
where there
see
were
it. Yeah. I mean,
a million tears. I felt like she was right here with me, hugging me,
Perfect.
and it was amazing. So
I know.
just-
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
That's encouraging. So it's not a substitute for in person, but you know, but if you're in some little dinky town in the middle of God knows where, Zoom's going to be a lifesaver. You know, there's just 4 old drunks and they haven't changed in 30 years. I mean, good luck. Good luck. Okay, let's move on.
Hi.
No more questions. Save them till later. Okay.
I have a question. My name is Evelyn. I'm an alcoholic, clean and sober alcoholic.
Evelyn, he's
Hi.
asking us to wait till after, okay?
Wait till after, or I won't get through, and I want to get through. So we allotted 10 minutes and we went 20. So I gotta rush. I will stay on and I'll answer your question. I promise you. Okay. So now we did the connection phase. All right. 1, 2, 3, connection. Now the second phase is the correction phase. It's a good way to think about it. So I'm doing a realignment. This self has now entered in the presence of another person into a willingness to do God's will, to turn my will and my life over to God's care. That's the decision. Now what I'm asked to do is, okay, look at these blockages that exist between you and God, the blockages that exist between you and other people, and be aware that other people also have blockages, that if you can really get the flow, the unity going here, that's how you're going to have a changed world. All right. We have a long way to go, but that's the correction phase. So, you know, 4, I'm going to do an inventory. What's wrong with me? 5, I'm going to share it. 6 and 7 are the 4 absolutes. We'll look at that. 8 and 9, I make amends. We know those. So correction, step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. How was it done before the big book? So here's from Shoemaker. It would be a very good thing if you took a piece of fool's, that's a misspelling there, not fool's crap, fool's scrap. I had corrected that in one of these things, but not this one. A fool's scrap paper, like a yellow pad, and wrote down the sins you feel guilty of. One of the simplest and best rules for self-examination that I know of is to use the 4 standards, which Dr. Robert E. Spear said represented the summary of the Sermon on the Mount: absolute honesty, absolute purity, absolute unselfishness, absolute love. Review your life in their light. Put down everything that doesn't measure up. Be ruthlessly, realistically honest. So, I mean, when Eddie comes to visit Wilson in the hospital the 2nd or 3rd time, he basically shares his sins, he said, you know, root and branch. He was probably given the either 4 pieces of paper, or they took a sheet and folded it in 4. Where are you, you know, are you honest? Are you pure? Are you unselfish? Are you loving? Where are you falling short on these? And that's how they kind of did their inventory. They didn't call it an inventory, but how do you measure up? You gave your life to God. What needs changing? What needs changing? And they'd pray about that. So step 4, in a nutshell, go back here. It's not an analysis. And I think that's one of the dangers that I find with the columns in the big book. I did my 4th step using the columns in the big book. I wasn't aware about the absolutes and all that stuff when I got sober. I used the big book. But what I've found is many people turn it into an analysis of themselves rather than a confession of what are you ashamed of? What do you want to take to the grave with you? Now I got that stuff out too, but that was the essence of what they were asked to write down, because that's what's separating them. That's what's carrying them down. The Oxford group, so not an analysis, but putting down on paper the sins, secrets, and the shames that I want to hide. You know, I don't want you to know this about me. I don't want you to know what I did. I don't want you to know what I thought. I don't want you to know what I'm thinking right now. I don't want you to know what's got me really stuck in life. That's the stuff. That's the stuff. Now, however you get that out, that's what's important. It's not that your columns are really neat and you're, and you've figured out your part in it. I think that's helpful. And that was certainly part of the Oxford group thing, that you take responsibility for your part. No question about that. But that's not a substitute for getting to the dirt, the stuff you hate. Oxford group defines sin as anything that separates you from God, from others, or from yourself. That's the separation stuff. Ask God to show you what needs to be seen and what needs to be written down. If you've turned your life over to God, you're not responsible for digging in and doing the most brilliant research on yourself and self-analyzing yourself. You're just responsible for being honest. God, show me. And you will know when God is showing you, because that thought's going to come up and say, not that one. Not that one. Yeah, that one. That's the stuff. Ask yourself if you're consciously avoiding something. Again, this was meant to be a one-time experience. All right? It's not to say you can't do, share more stuff. Stuff comes up, stuff happens, and you need to share it. 10, 11, 12, take care of that. But do a one-time inventory. I was carrying mine around. I had a wise sponsor who said, burn it, Bill, let it go. Let it go. You only have to do this thing once. You did it once. Trauma survivors. A lot of alcoholics are trauma survivors. Sometimes we can repeat the trauma, go back to it over and over and over again, and beat ourselves up with it. There's a letting go of the past. There's a turning that over to God. All right? And if you do it right once, yeah, you're gonna find more stuff and you're gonna share more stuff. No question about that. But I don't know that you have to go and open some of those old wounds again. Maybe you will. Maybe that's what your guidance will be to do. But I don't know. 5. Admit it to God, to ourselves, and to another human being, the exact nature of our wrongs. I love that. Fits my little diagram here. Because it's a 3-part step, isn't it? Admit it to God. You have this conversation with God. This is who I am. You have it with yourself. It's a funny one, isn't it? Admit to myself. This is who I am. This is a part of who I am. It's not all of who I am. But this is me without you. And then we do that with that one other person. And I did it with a guy named Floyd, and he said something to me at the end that I've never forgotten. At the end, and I did the tears, and I mean, it was some tough stuff. And he shakes my hand and he says, "Bill, welcome to the human race." Never forgotten it. And he was exactly right. That up until that point, I had not joined the human race. I was separate from. That was the entry point. I just wrote a newsletter. It's on 4 and 5, so it's fresh on my mind. And I forget what the heck I was going to say on that, but I don't know. It's the price of admission. That's what I was going to say. That we say there's no cost to AA, and I say bullshit. Huge cost, and this is where I really meet it. You know, this is where I really meet it, or I don't. I've met very few alcoholics, some, but very few, who really did an honest, absolutely honest 5th step and went out and got drunk again. Very few. 9 out of 10 of them will tell me, yeah, no, I held some stuff back. I held some stuff back. Well, that's what we're going to get. So they called it confession before we had a step 5. So again, here's Shoemaker. The thing to do next is to face your sins. So now you rarely hear that word sin in AA, do we? And Wilson said he steered clear of it in 6 and 7 because we're so sensitive to the churchy thing, and in many cases, rightly so. Shortcomings, character defects. That's what he's talking about. So the next thing to do is face your sins. Where are you cutting corners? I found it necessary to go to someone I could trust and make a clean breast of my sins. Many quite respectable people have hidden things in their past and their present that need to come out in confidence to someone. The only release and hope for many bound and imprisoned and defeated people lies in frank sharing. All right. And this was very much a part of the Oxford group, that you went to another person and you shared your deepest stuff. It is not costly to share our problems or even our comfortable sins, but it is costly to share the worst thing we ever did, the deepest sin of our life, the besetting temptation that dogs us. And then Ann Smith, Dr. Bob's wife, had a lovely phrase. She encouraged people to go naked to God. And if you do that, and I did it, and I'm sure most of you in this meeting have done it, you know what I'm talking about. That this is freedom. That you were shackled and bound. And Wilson used an image, and it didn't make it into the big book. It did in some of his talks, where he said he felt like he was in the back of a cave and he was chained to. That's what his alcoholism was like. He was chained to the back of a cave, and there's his family and his doctor and everybody out there saying, "Come out, Bill, come out." And I couldn't break free. I couldn't get free. And then Ebby walked in, and because he had been chained in his cave, he knew what I was feeling, and he was able to bring me out. Then that's what you do with this other person in the 5th step. That they. And I tell you what, the other thing the guy said to me that I've never forgotten, he said, "I'm not here to forgive you when we started. I'm not here to forgive you. I can't do that. I'm here to accept you. Don't ever lose sight of that. I'm here to accept you. And I don't care what you've done. I don't care. I'm here to accept you. And that's the dynamic that happens in this needed transformation. You see? So very necessary, very necessary. And I think I'll tell you this, I've heard some confessions from Oxford group people. We have a lot more stuff to get to than most of them did. I went to Switzerland where they still exist. And, you know, boy, anyway. Where did this confession come from? The Oxford group based it on the letter of James. If you want a copy of, that was one of the scriptures that they found really helpful, the letter of James, 1 Corinthians 13, and the Sermon on the Mount. If you'll write me, I'll send you an electronic copy of that. But confess, here's the line in there. Confess your sins one to another. Pray for one another that you may be healed. What did it include? Sharing with one other human being the things you swore you'd take with you to the grave. Again, it was intended as a one-time event. Again, not saying that we don't intend. Continue to take personal inventory. When we're wrong, promptly admit it. And can that often include admitting it to another person? Absolutely. Is there great benefit to that? Absolutely. So step 6 and 7. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. Humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. Well, where did this, what are we getting at here? We've already used the absolutes because they did, that was their confession. That was their 4th step. How did your life measure up by these absolutes? The absolutes were central to Oxford Group. And they're still used in Akron. And you go to a meeting in Akron or you go to a meeting in Cleveland, you're likely to see them hanging on the wall. You go to a meeting in New York, you're not going to see them. Bill Wilson was not a great fan of them. Dr. Bob was a great fan of them. All right. And can they be misunderstood? I think they can. So let's try to see if we can understand them a little better. So the 4 absolutes: honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love. Most people, honesty, yes. Unselfishness, who can be against it? Love and service. What's this purity stuff? Well, that's the sex part, in part, that Wilson addresses in the big book, and that is a part of every 4th and 5th step, because it's an area that we all get in trouble with. But it's not just sex. It's in the Oxford Group thing, it was sex, but it was more than that too. So let's dig into these 4 absolutes. Quote from Dr. Bob: the 4 absolutes, as we called them, were the only yardsticks we had in the early days before the steps. I think the absolutes still hold good and can be extremely helpful. I have found at times that a question arises and I want to do the right thing, but the answer is not obvious. Almost always, if I measure my decision carefully by the yardsticks of absolute honesty, absolute unselfishness, absolute purity, and absolute love, and it checks up pretty well with those 4, then my answer can't be very far out of the way. Now, that was in Dr. Bob's last address, major address to the AA Fellowship. And as I say, he was a big fan of the absolutes. Here are the absolutes fleshed out. I took this from Tom Powers, who Wilson was his was his sponsor. And as I said, he helped him write the 12 and 12. So his group kind of put together what's behind these, because they're the only group, AAA, that still uses them. And the old timer I talked to the other day in Philly, he was a big proponent of these too, not a member of AAA, but he says you take the steps and you take the absolutes with them, and you've got a formula for living. A formula for living. So what is absolute honesty? No lying, no cheating, no stealing. In a word, in all your affairs, simply and absolutely no falsehood. And we're all liars. We're all liars. And see if you can go through a day, without telling a lie to yourself, to somebody else. It's a marvelous challenge. Absolute purity, purity of mind. What's my thought life like? Purity of body. Am I taking care of myself? I was drinking 26 cups of coffee, smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day when I came in here. Purity of the emotions. All right. The emotions will take charge of us. Wilson suffered greatly from depression. He never grew up. He was immature at the emotional level. He worked at it, like we all do, but there's a lot of work to be done at that level. Purity of heart. Purity of heart. Where am I coming from? Inside, deep inside. Sexual purity. Hell of a lot of 13th stepping going on out there in recovery land. Absolute unselfishness, seeking what is right and true ahead of what I want in every situation. Harry Thibault's work is very helpful here. Ego factors in surrender. He was Wilson's psychiatrist. And you can find his work on the web, TIEBOUT. Good stuff. Probably read that pamphlet 100 times my first year. Absolute love. Loving God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength, and loving your neighbor as yourself. Sometimes I cross that as out and substitute and yourself, because loving ourselves is oftentimes really difficult for addicts. Here's Dr. Bob's grave site in Akron. He's there, Ann is there. And right next to him, the 4 absolutes: honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love. I think in the handouts, there'll be some further explanation of this, kind of going deeper into the steps and how they fit in there. Steps 6 and 7 in a nutshell. And this don't slide over this one too quickly, because it's where the problems come in. That the aim on a daily basis is for perfection. The aim is towards God. The reality is, I'm going to settle for progress. But there's a difference between aiming for progress and aiming for perfection. Now, the way I best have found to explain this is this. If you're flying an airplane, you set your compass on due north, and then you stray. The airplane strays, so you bring it back to what? To due north. Not kind of north, sort of north, half-assed north, not south. Due north. Perfection. Aim for that. That theoretical North Pole. There really isn't a pole, but you're aiming towards it and you're adjusting. You're adjusting. It's a world of difference. A world of difference. And I don't know that I put the quote up here, but Wilson said he put 6 and 7. He put the 4 absolutes into step 6 and 7. They asked him, where'd you put the 4 absolutes in your steps? He said, I put them in 6 and 7. And that really opened 6 and 7 up for me in a wholly new way. All right? Wholly new way. Eight and 9, I'm not going to teach you much on this. I don't know that Oxford Group has a heck of a lot to teach us. Made a list of all persons we had harmed, became willing to make amends to them all. The thing I would add, and made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. These actions are not just for our benefit. And I hear that a lot in 12-step recovery. Screw the other guy. If he doesn't accept my thing, I just got to do my stuff. It's all about me. Well, I understand that. And in one sense, I suppose that's true. We're not responsible for how they react. But in another way, it is an opportunity for them to change their lives. That when they are confronted with the depth of honesty that a real step 9 can bring to them, for many people, it can be life-changing for them. Oftentimes a confession comes, I played a part in that too, I accept, I forgive you for what you did, but I need you to forgive me for what I did too. Sometimes it will open that door. And so that's an element that the Oxford Group had, that when they would share their list of what they'd done wrong, where they had harmed someone, when they shared that with them, there was the hope that it would bring about a changed world, because the Oxford Group was out to change the world. And that's one of the differences that Wilson brought to the table. He says, I'm not interested in changing the world. I'm only interested in changing alcoholics. We have no opinions on outside issues, Okay, let's take some questions on 4 through, 9. 4 through 9. Any questions? I told you that step 1 was going to be the big one, so I always spend most of my time on that. If you get that sucker right, you're in pretty good shape. Any questions on the absolutes? They take a hit in it's progress, not perfection. Well, that's right. But the aim is for perfection. Not to become a perfectionist, because that's the danger. But God is the absolute.
Kelly S. has her hand up.
Please.
Hi, thank you, Kelly S. Alcohol. So when I first got sober and went through the steps with my very first sponsor, I wanted to get an A in AA, and I wanted to make sure that my 4th step was complete. However, my brain was still kind of foggy at that point.
Right.
And even now, years later, I can be awoken in the middle of the night with something that I remember that I did that I am shameful for.
Okay.
And so how do I handle that? If I don't go back and do another 5th step, or how do I handle that?
You share it with somebody. You share it with someone.
Okay. So I can just go to my sponsor and say, oh, shoot, I just remembered that I did this and I feel really bad about it. And I don't want to do that again. Okay.
That's fine. Stuff is going to come up. So the important part, I think, of the 4th and 5th step is if you can leave there and you have not consciously left anything out, then move on. Move on. But over the years, you're going to have more awarenesses. But if it's the conscious withholding of guilt and shame, if you've done that, you're on your way. And then more will be revealed.
We have a hand up, Catherine B.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate how you're framing this. I have a question that probably you answered part of it just now, but it has to do with how we do the fourth step right now, fifth step right now, where we focus on the my part. And I feel like that now when we do the steps, I mean, I got into AA in the 70s, it was different, but right now it seems like it's really getting really therapeutic. So we drill down to the my part, almost like that is the whole cause of doing that. The whole purpose of doing it is to discover that gem of my part. And so I'm not sure, that's a big different framing to turn that around, but I sure would love to, because I find when I work with people, we get bogged down in that.
Me too. I mean, I've heard hundreds of fifth steps, and you know, give me a person who dumps the stuff they don't want to talk about. That's the stuff that has to come out. If I have to sit there for 2 hours listening to somebody's analysis, it bores the hell out of me, and it doesn't do them all that much good. It is good to know your part. And I'm not against that. And I think the inventory in the big book does help you to get that. But it's a blend. It's also saying, you know, we dumped our stuff. So a little combination of each is good, but there is a danger of too much analysis.
So let me, just one more thing on that then. Yeah. So I'm accustomed to, when we do fifth steps, that they take hours, right? And there's a lot of like this analysis going on, and often you're reading from pages and pages and pages of journaling, and it's just a lot of going through that, and the person listening is, you know, making some notes and shaking their head, but that does seem mechanical. I don't know any other way we do that, though.
I agree with you.
We have a question in the room.
How long does your version of the fifth step last?
If they're doing it on the 4 absolutes,
yes,
and you're keeping it kind of simple, and most of the people I work with are people who've been in AA for a while, so it's like, you know, we don't have to go over the, you know, the basics. Just dump the stuff. Talk about what when you measure yourself against honesty, what comes up? Well, I've been a liar since I was a kid. Talk to me about that. You know, then there was some back and forthness in the old day too, that the person that they were sharing with was not just listening, but sharing some of their stuff too. And that made for a different experience.
So Bill, we have a question in the room, and then Jolie has her hand up, and then I think that will be the end of the question and answer time. Gretchen?
My question is, it's due to my own experience. I did a 4-step like in 2001, and it lasted, and the 5th step lasted like 14 hours or something like that. But I had relapsed several times since then, and so now I'm doing a 4th step again, you know, and I know that you were talking about one 4-step. What would you say to someone in my position? You know, is this a 4th step or a 10th step? You know?
Yeah, I mean, in some sense, that doesn't matter a great deal. If someone's coming back from relapse, you know, and someone's taking them through the steps, something wasn't right, you know, and that's fine. So yeah, if you have a sponsor and they're taking you through the steps, that's fine. But at some point, you know, really dig into 10, 11, and 12, because that's where it's at. And if you're just going around the circle, the squirrel cage of 1 through 9, boy, you can get exhausted, and AA loses its zip. There's no juice to it. It's a guilt trip over and over.
Yeah, with me, it was like I only got to 8 before I relapsed. So I really didn't get to that 10, 11, and 12 steps. So
10, 11, and 12 started early. And if you'll really look at the big book, you know, prayer is throughout it. You don't wait till you get to the end to do prayer and meditation.
right.
That's the whole key to this thing.
Okay,
Thank you.
Jolie?
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Jolie, alcoholic. You had said in that, you know, Bill had inserted steps, the 4 absolutes into steps 6 and
Yes.
7. So when you're taking a newcomer, or, you know, I mean, I get that you work with people that have been around for a while,
Right.
but how do you incorporate working them through the steps when you get to 6 and 7?
I give them some information on, I think it's in the handouts,
Okay.
about the 4 absolutes, because that's what the steps are. That 6 and 7 are, to me, 30 years later after finding this out. Because for 20 years, I didn't know much about the absolutes. I knew Wilson didn't like them. He had a quote, you know, you can't expect an alcoholic to get good by Thursday, was his expression, you know.
Yeah.
And Bill had his purity issues, shall we say, that perhaps had some influence on his not liking those 4 absolutes so much. And Bob was the more spiritual guy, and Wilson said that. He said his spirituality far exceeds mine. Well, once I started digging into the history, I saw how critical they were. And then when I came across the quote, it's in Ernie Kurtz's book on Not God, A History of AA, as a footnote. Boy, it just opened those steps up in a new way. So there's a surrender, you know, that we do in step 3.
Mhm.
There's a almost, not even almost, there is a second surrender, I think, that comes in 6 and 7. You gave your life and your will. Now let's look at these things. Can you live a life of honesty, a life of unselfishness, of love and purity? All right. And can you understand those? It's, you know, it's not that you're going to become perfect, but that you're aiming towards that. God is perfection. We are not. I have yet to live one full day being totally honest, pure, unselfish, and loving. Not a whole day. But that's what I see in my inventory in the morning as I look at myself. And that becomes the work of the next day going forward. Aiming for perfection, settling for progress.
Got it.
It's a subtle distinction, but it's vital. Does that help?
Well, it does, because like for me, the way I've always been taught is I take that 4th column and all of that me, myself, you know, lying, thieving, cheating, all of the things. And, you know,
Well, the
that's what I
pioneers
was-
reduced it down to 4.
Yeah.
And
Got
I
it.
like that number.
Yeah.
It's easier to kind of keep track of.
Yeah.
When you get to the 12 and 12 and they got the 7 deadly sins and the 10 commandments and you're up to 17 by that point, you know, you can get pretty lost and confused.
Yeah.
But if you
Awesome.
focus on honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love, it's, you know, it's doable.
Yeah. Fabulous. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we got through that. And how are we doing on time? So we got about a half hour left. Okay, cool. You know, I think I can do it. I hope so. I'm surrendered. Praying for guidance here. Step 10, continue to take personal inventory. When we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Okay, so where's this thing come from? Well, the Oxford group had the the four absolutes. And then Wilson was, Frank Bookman, the founder of the group, was asked to explain his program for change quickly, succinctly. And he came up with the five, what he called the 5 C's. So let me run through this quick. This is the program, and you'll see AA in this, all right? Gain the confidence of a new person. And we've lost a little bit of that. I mean, although if you read Working with Others, you'll see a lot of it. Learn, get his history or her history, visit with the family, know all you can about this person. You gain the confidence. Someone's really interested in me. All right, gain their confidence. Then comes the confession, partly yours, partly theirs. All right, this becomes our 4th and 5th step. The conviction, and this is 6 and 7 too. The conviction, the feeling of, no, I don't want to live this way. I want to live that way. I don't like who I was. I feel convicted. It's not a common word that we use. It was much more common in the 20s and 30s, but to be convicted of sin. It doesn't mean they ship your butt off to, prison. It's not that kind of conviction. It's an awareness of, I want to go this way and I don't want to go back to that way. And then the conversion, the transformation, the change, the thing that that Roland was sent in search of. You follow me? A conversion experience. All right? That's what we're seeking. And then comes the continuance. All right? Because this becomes now a way of life. I've gone through the process. I've dumped my stuff. I've surrendered to God. I've made my amends. Now I'm going to live. Now I'm going to continue. And this is not just, that's what happened to 10, 11, and 12, the maintenance steps. And there was kind of a put down for that, I think, when I first came in. The maintenance steps, like every 5,000 miles, change your oil, maintenance. No, this is living. This is living. This is where you continue the change. So some quotes on that. We believe entirely that conversion is the experience which initiates the new life, but we're not fools enough to think that the beginning is the end. All subsequent life is the development of the relationship with God, which conversion opens. You see? 11, this conversion is just opening in 10, 11, and 12. There is need for rededication day by day, hour by hour, by which progressively, in every quiet time, every morning that I'm doing this thing, the contaminations of sin and self-will are further sloughed off. We will need, in this sense, to keep surrendering as long as we live. But do it in 11. Do it, Oh, go back. Where did I? Oh, come on. Now this I took from Tom Powers, and I just love it. But it's the flow between a really good step 10 and your prayer and meditation in the morning, your step 11. So in step 10, we watch. We watch ourselves. We watch ourselves on the basis of the 4 absolutes. We watch ourselves on the basis of our relationships. And if you're really watching, like I said, I can't go through a whole day without coming up short. When I've watched, I've seen where I come up short. Now I know what to pray for. Now I know what to pray for. So what Power said is, if we don't watch, we don't know what the hell to pray for. That is important. So each morning, it's not just I do two-way prayer. It's each morning I do watchfulness, mindfulness. I watch myself inside. I watch myself outside. I watch for my connection to my higher power, to God. All right. Is there something in the way? Watch for that. If you watch, you'll find it. You know? And then you ask for help. You ask for help. What did we come up with? Wilson did a shift. He'd put the opposites of the absolutes. You know, the absolutes are in the steps. They're just disguised. We watched for dishonesty. Well, what's the opposite of that? Honesty. But it's positive. Not that we watch for dishonesty. Strive to become more honest. There's a positive end of that thing. Selfishness. Self-centeredness. Problem with self. Problem with selfishness, self-centeredness. 100 different forms. Watch for it. Watch for it. Fear. Watch for the fear. Watch for the rage. Watch for the emotions. What's going on inside? I watch inside and I watch outside. And it doesn't take that long. And I don't do it. This is me now. This is me. I don't do it with a formula. I watch, I feel, I intuit what's going on. I had a young guy in treatment many years ago. He said, I'm not getting this shit, you know, and he was ready to quit. And we just had a one-on-one in my office, and we got around to the force, you know. I don't believe in God, you know, but we got into a discussion of Star Wars, you know. Is that, well, I'm blocking on the thing. Is there an obstacle in the force? Is there a blockage in the force? Is there a what's the phrase? Does anybody out there know it? Is there something in the force?
There's a disturbance.
A disturbance. Thank you. Is there a disturbance in the force? You know, by this point, we are Jedi Knights on our way to recovery. All right. And we're gonna sense, is there a disturbance in the force? Is there a disturbance in my relationship with my wife, with my family, with my folks at work? Is there a disturbance? Is there a disturbance inside in my connection with God? Is there a self-hatred emerging again? All right. That's going after me. Is another addiction coming up and taking over? You know, it ain't just alcohol. You know, it ain't just alcohol, you know. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. So step 10, watch daily. Yeah, okay. And then step 11, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. I do a 3-hour workshop on this, so this is going to be fast. We know the step, all right? Dr. Bob and the good old timers. They were most ardent too in their practice of meditation and prayer. They felt that when people commenced to adhere to these high moral standards, the 4 absolutes, then God could enter and direct their lives. Under these conditions, every individual could receive specific guidance, which could inspire every decision and act of living, great and small. Following meditation and prayer, they practiced what they called a quiet time, asking God for specific directives. It's actually more two-way prayer. In the two-way prayers, when you're asking for the directives, pencil in hand, they wrote down what came into their minds. Dr. Bob, this is in Dr. Bob, the good old timers, Dr. Bob's morning devotion. So quiet time is spending a period of time. I mean, start with 15 minutes, whatever you're able to give to it. Most people will work up to a half hour or an hour. Dr. Bob's morning devotion consisted of a short prayer, a 20-minute study of a familiar verse from a Bible, or, and I've read this in other Oxford Group literature, or some guided literature that you find that really speaks to your soul, sets it on fire. All right. So you will find your authors. Dr. Bob had an extensive library, all right, where he's reading this spiritual material, not just the big book over and over again. You know, remember Wilson said AA is a spiritual kindergarten. You know, go and find books. And these early people did do that. Quiet period of waiting for direction as to where he that day should find use for his talent, having heard the prayer. The difference in two-way prayer from regular prayers, most prayers talking to God. Well, this is not talking to God. It's listening to God. It's listening to an inner voice. The great reality is within. Oxford Group people believed if you're trying to live by the four absolutes, that voice will guide you. Having heard, he would heard and written down his guidance for the day. He would go about his father's business, as he put it. Dr. Bob and the good old timers. Prayer and meditation were more important than meetings. This was a mind blower when I started digging into the history. So this was a 1938 report from Frank Amos, who went and studied what was becoming AA. Didn't have a name yet, but of the 110 members then in the program, 70 were in the Akron, Cleveland area. Isn't that interesting that they were getting a hell of a lot more people coming in where the absolutes and the spirituality was heavier than in New York, where it was lightweight and the focus was on meetings. The AA members of that time did not consider meetings necessary to maintain sobriety. My God, that'll get you kicked out today, won't it? They were simply desirable. They were helpful. Morning devotion and quiet time, however, were musts. You want to see a difference between the early program and how it has become more mechanical? I think you'll see the reliance is on meetings. You know, meetings. And that's where I was at 20 years sober. It was like, is this all there is? Okay, I got to do my steps and I got my meetings. No, I missed the prayer and meditation. Didn't know how to do it. And here's Bill Wilson. I sort of always felt that something was lost from AA when we stopped emphasizing the morning meditation. All right, so what I want to do, let me go back there. I did want to share, now this is what I do in the two-way prayer workshop, and I'm trying to put, you can go online on the two-way prayer website, it'll give you most of this, but over the summer, I'm trying to do a whole workshop that will take its place. And so if people want to learn exactly how to do two-way prayer, they can go there, and I won't have to do so damn many workshops because I get tired of hearing myself talk. Here's 3 examples very quickly of a sample of two-way prayer where you're finding a need and you're asking a question, and then you're writing down the guidance that comes. Did this at a treatment center several years ago. Young woman, 2 weeks sober. I mean, 2 weeks sober, they were teaching people how to do this practice. You know? What's her need? Write it down. Short. Doesn't have to be long. It's not journaling. God, I've tried getting clean and sober before. Tell me what I need to do that's different this time. Dear child, I recommend that people use a term of endearment. Dear child, you're a brilliant young woman. You need to change the places you go to, the people you surround yourself with, the drugs, the alcohol you're destroying yourself with. Stop. Don't belittle yourself with this destructive behavior. Be clean, clear your mind, fill it with cleansing thoughts. Take the time to love yourself. Everything will be okay. Love yourself first, foremost. I'm the light at the end of your tunnel. Woman at a two-way prayer workshop, and I love this one because it's, I think you can begin to see the depths of the healing that goes on in this practice. I've been struggling with self-loathing. Dear Heavenly Father, I've been struggling with self-loathing. Look in the mirror, hate who I see. I feel unlovable. Please help me, Father. My precious child, it saddens me when you're hurting so. You are loved more than you could ever know. I've watched you over these past several years go through some very painful losses, especially the loss of your grandson. My sweet daughter, come to me. I am real. I am safe. Treat yourself as you would your own beloved child. Nourish your body. It's my gift to you. Speak only love to yourself. Do these things, and the light of my endless love for you will fill you up, shine onto others. You'll know self-love. You'll begin to receive all the desires of your heart. This was a guy, another workshop, several years sober. His two daughters witnessed a suicide, all right? And it was ripping him apart. Father God, I don't understand why I have to go through so much pain. Seems everyone I love dies. Some other personal stuff. My son, I have always been walking beside you like two sets of footprints in the sand. I've kept you alive for a reason. You've suffered for a reason, just as many before you have suffered, so that their hearts are filled with compassion and you become closer to those in pain, the hopeless. I love you. I always have. I always will. When you have flashbacks, I'll cast a light between you and what you witnessed. Instead, you will see me. You're so much stronger than you think. Don't keep asking why. Language of the heart, not of the head. Son, I've always been with you, but it's time you feel my presence, and it's time we got to work together. God, and a big part of Oxford Group, and I think if you'll really study the handouts, you'll see an example of how they approach prayer, what their beliefs are. I've got lots of podcasts on some of this material, but I think that should be enough to kind of give you a flavor for what the two-way prayer practice is about, or 11 step. So you do it each morning, you practice meditation, and they were very free and open, whatever works for you. Read and reflect on scripture or guided books. And then you do the two-way prayer, ask for guidance, either for a problem or if you don't have a problem, lucky you, then you just look at the day ahead, like Dr. Bob did. Does somebody come to mind? Call so-and-so, do such and such, clean your office, rake the leaves, go to the gym, stuff you really hate to do, see if you get guidance to do it. Then you listen for God's voice in response and use your imagination. If God were to speak, what would God say? So do some, it's creative writing. But what you're going to find, if you will give yourself over to this, if you'll park your ego to one side and allow the unconscious, which is, I think, how God gets to us, in dreams, in imagination, in intuition, in all of these parts, in creativity, where does that come from? It's going to come out, and you write it down. So you listen for the voice, write it down. Let's see, write down the thoughts and the guidance you receive. Continue doing it throughout the day. Pause when agitated. And then the samples of two-way prayer. I knew I put that in there somewhere. So we got a little ahead of ourselves and did that. Okay. Step 12, having had a spiritual awakening. As a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Again, there was a shift away, and I think this was a weakening of AA. I understand it, and for 20 years, I said, well, this is better. That Wilson and the AA people thought, you know, too many people thought they had to have an experience, but the word used to say experience, all right? But the main purpose, all right, so the main purpose of this step is, I believe, to bring about a psychic change or a conversion experience. Having experienced this, then they then carried the message of change to others. They were called life changers, soul surgeons. They went around the world doing this. And they practiced these principles as a way of life. So I want to play Bill Wilson. I invited his spirit to come and join the meeting. He said, sure. And so this is it's just a 3-minute deal. And it's he wanted to change the word awakening back to experience, and AA people wouldn't let him do it. You know, the central office said, no. Holy writ, sacred document, it is not to be changed. So let me see if I can pull this off and see if you can hear Wilson.
My own experience, though, in changing steps is rather amusing. It just shows you how things can get frozen. Somebody just showed me a copy of the first printing of the AA book, the big red thick one that we made so thick with thick paper so the drunks would get their money's worth. And in that, yeah, this is it. In here, you will find in the 12th step that this, having had a spiritual experience, we use the word experience to denote the spiritual transformation. And no doubt took that notion from William James, whose great book, Varieties of Religious Experience, laid a foundation for this movement. And the foundation was upon hopelessness, because the James cases who had the marked transforming experiences were people who at depth admitted that they had something that they alone couldn't get over, under, or around. So this transforming experience was called by James experience, and his book was called Varieties of Religious Experience, and so are his examples of it, and we have duplicated them in all of their myriad forms. Now then, I always liked this word experience, but there was a hell of a movement. I believe it emanated down in Greenwich Village in about 1937 or 8, when the book was under contemplation, or rather just after the book was published, be more like 40. And this was a movement to get rid of this conversion business and this experience business. And after a hell of a lot of tub thumping, the people who wished to change got it, and I dutifully inscribed in the second printing that hereafter this was not to be an experience, it was to be a tepid form of experience called an awakening. Well, I don't know whether anybody got well in Greenwich Village who would have died otherwise. No, I really don't. And so sometime afterward, when AA had got a little less absolutist and this more intellectuals had got down to their right size, I said, well, I'm going to try to put back that word experience. I'll be damned if I don't like it. And I think some of the old mossbacks like me would like it too. So I tried to put it back. And I was absolutely shouted down and assaulted for heresy, by God. And I was threatened with excommunication to change one word of the Holy Writ, which is now spiritual awakening.
Well, I think that's that's how the machine operates. It's in print. We ain't changing it. You know, even if you wrote it, you're stuck with it. So, any questions? We only have about 6 minutes left, but any questions or comments? I'll do my little commercial here, and then we'll do it and then end. The website Two-Way Prayer has got lots of material that you can go to and you can download. You can email me at twowayprayer@gmail.com if you want anything sent to you. The podcasts are under the title Father Bill W. I think it's some good stuff, some good interviews there. It's trying to get back to the history, the psychology, and the spirituality. And then if you're on the website, sign up for the newsletter. And those are also archived on the website. So plenty of information. And let's see if we got any questions or comments, or run me out of town. That's fine.
Just wanted to let everybody know that I will make this recording available.
Okay, cool.
Carl G has his hand up.
Yes, I'm Carl, and I'm still an alcoholic.
Oh, son of a gun. We'll have to do another